Ms. Beebe?
Here.
Ms. Beebe present. Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett absent. Ms. Bofi?
Here.
Ms. Bofi present. Ms. Bradford? Ms. Bradford absent. Ms. Dastu? Ms. Dastu absent. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey present. Mr. Gill?
Here.
Mr. Gill present. Ms. Hill? Ms. Hill absent. Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Lee present. Ms. Orange Jones?
Here.
Ms. Orange Jones present. Mr. Romer?
Here.
Mr. Romer present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we address the first item, please?
Sure. Your consent agenda is ready for approval. We will be adding items 5.1, 5.2, 8.1, and 9.1.
Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Lee, second Ms. Beebe. Do we have any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
We need a motion to take an item out of order.
The chair is looking to take the executive session agenda item out of order. And the committee chair asks for a motion to go into executive session to discuss. Can you read what we're
Yes.
discussing?
We are looking at item 11.1, is a consideration of an executive session on the following litigation: Berry et al. v. Pasterek et al., USED, docket number 10CV04049, as well as Oliver v. Orleans Parish School Board et al., Civil District Court for the Parish of Orleans, docket number 05-12244.
Can we have a motion?
I move.
Ms. Beebe? Do we have a second? Ms. Dastu? The committee chair asks for a roll call vote on the motion to go into executive session and states that a 2/3 affirmative vote of members present is required for passage of the motion to go into executive session.
Ms. Beebe?
Present.
Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett's not here. Ms. Bofi?
Present.
Ms. Bofi, yes. Ms. Bradford?
Excuse me, we are looking for a yes or no vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Well, I figured. Okay. Ms. Bradford? Ms. Bradford is absent.
I'm sorry, staff, we had 2 present votes.
But I know that you want to go with this? It's yes.
Well, I think we need to
Ms.
start
Beebe?
over.
Start over. I said yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett is absent. Ms. Bofi?
Yes.
Ms. Bofi voted yes. Ms. Bradford? Ms. Bradford is absent. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey, yes. Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Mr. Gill, yes. Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Hill, yes. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee, yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones votes yes. Mr. Romer?
Yes.
Mr. Romer, yes. Ms. Dastu?
Yes.
Ms. Dastu votes yes. Motion passed.
Okay, thank you. As chair of this committee, I'd like to inform the public that no votes will be taken while in executive session, and that all votes will be taken in public when we return. Thank you. Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bradford. Do we have any objections to that motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Dastu.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we receive the reports from legal counsel in executive session.
Second.
And we have a second by Mr. Lee. Do we have any objections to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Okay, we are moving on to your standing items. Item 4.1, the consideration of a discussion of the MFP formula, and the department recommendation is to receive.
Page what?
Page 101.
Okay, do we have a motion to receive?
This is to receive.
So moved.
Okay, Ms. Dastu, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lee? Do we have any discussion?
I
Hearing
think,
none. Ms. Dastu?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Ms. Zeno. We carried some items from last month. We asked that the department come back and talk to us about some further work that they were going to do around the possible bringing the, I believe it was dual enrollment and Louisiana virtual school programming into the formula. I think, Ms. Zeno, you're going to, maybe it'd probably be a good time to brief the board on those 2 items, because we've been talking about those for the last few months. I'd like to hear from her on that.
Yes, right now on the MFP study agenda, we have 2 items with regards to dual enrollment. The idea here that we brought forth to the board last month was to discuss the possibility of having the support for dual enrollment courses be included in the formula. The other thing is the Louisiana Virtual School, operated by the department currently, possibly coming up with a funding mechanism to bring those courses and their availability within the formula as well. We are continuing to research the possibility and manner in which to do both of those, and we would be available to have those for the next meeting to explain our recommendations on how that was going to occur.
Okay, so Mr. Lee.
Beth, would that, if it were in the MFP formula, the dual enrollment, would that mean the funds would flow to the university that enrolled the students? I don't know how it would fit into the MFP formula.
I think there's a couple of options. Actually, right now, the school districts are supporting some costs associated with those dual enrollment courses. So I believe in the formula that we would recommend that money be in the formula itself, and then that money be transferred to the universities on a course-by-course basis, depending on what the desire was.
But it would go to the university.
Unless, of course, in that particular district, they are the ones that are actually providing the course, because I do appreciate that in some districts, they actually have trained, skilled teachers that actually teach those courses. So in that case, we just have to determine how to retain those funds within that district that provide that service.
Ms. Zeno, for
Ms. Dastu?
purposes, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Board members, I guess new members, we have, in the last few years, with the formula, taken several actions that have brought what was outside funding for K-12 education into the formula. And some of the examples that I'll cite are the legacy type 2s, that those schools were brought into the formula. I think, was it last year or 2 years ago? This year. The Louisiana School for Math and Science. I think we did that last year. Is that correct?
Yes.
The NOCA. I think the NOCA became a full-day program, and that school was also brought into the formula. And finally, some of the work that the board did last year was the Office of Juvenile Justice. Some students that were formally under that umbrella had also been brought into the formula. So the board has, in the past few years, brought these K-12 educational providers into the formula. What that does in a declining and restricted kind of financial environment is give those children, those students that are receiving this education some protection. Because the formula in the last few years, there have been multiple cuts to all agencies in state government, and the only entity that I'm aware of that has not been cut has been the Minimum Foundation Program formula. So this has, I think, been a good move to protect these children who are receiving education via those providers. And so looking at these two items, the Louisiana Virtual School and dual enrollment, I think would follow the board practice of the last couple of years.
Mr. Romer?
I'm sorry, I stepped in late, Ms. Dastu. Were you referring to the inclusion of these other groups within the MFP?
I just wanted to bring the board sort of, that in the last year we did bring in the Type 2 legacies, Louisiana School for Math and Science, the NOCA School, the Office of Juvenile Justice, children that were being educated under that. This year we've been discussing over the past several months the feasibility of doing the Louisiana Virtual School, students that are on a programmatic kind of basis, and also dual enrollment. So,
are we currently running? Are we running a model right now that includes all relevant groups in there, or are there still some that fall outside the MFP at this point?
There still would be some that fall outside the MFP.
So we'd have to ask for a model to include it if we wanted to see it. Have we done that? Has anybody requested that?
No, I haven't.
I don't think so.
I'd like to make a motion to that effect, that we include in a simulation, run an MFP simulation that encompasses all of the relevant K-12 provider types that aren't currently in the MFP, just so we can see what that looks like.
Do we have a second?
I think we'd have to have a definition of what they are.
Well, I'll second the motion for purpose of discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Dastu.
What was your,
Mr.
sorry,
Romer?
Mr. Lee, I didn't hear.
I think we'd have to have a definition of what kind of programs you're talking about.
I would
You
assume
can't-
people,
I don't see how you could have a model without knowing what the model is going to be.
well, that's what I'm asking Beth to come back to us with is, what would a simulation look like, who would it include, and what would the impact be of the overall MFP? Anybody that's currently benefiting from the K-12
Right.
dollars that we spend.
You know, like an example would be the special schools. Louisiana School for the Deaf, Louisiana School for the Visually Impaired. You know, those are currently funded outside the formula. This morning we had a discussion about the pilot program on the students for scholarship program for students with disabilities. You know, that's currently, I think, funded outside the formula. What would that look like if it came into the formula?
Do we currently include juvenile justice, correct?
Right, we do,
That was as of this last year, correct?
correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Lee, any further questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions concerning this issue? Hearing none, are there any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Does that cover this item, or do we need a motion to dispense with this item? Okay, so we're finished with this item.
We have
Okay,
passed
next
it.
item, please.
Okay. The next item is item 5.3, in consideration of federal and state grants and allocations to LEAs, Type 2 charters, approved non-public schools, and community-based organizations. It's on page 104. And the department recommendation is to approve.
Do we have a motion to approve? Ms. Bradford, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Dastu, do we have any questions concerning this item? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
The next item is item 5.4, contracts and leases, the LDE, SSD, and BSS. The consideration of contracts and leases of $50,000 and over. The department recommendation is to approve. It's on page 109.
Move approval.
Ms. Dastu, do we have a second? Ms. Bradford, do we have any questions from the board?
I had a question about this one.
Ms. Bofi?
So I understand that PARC is going to be implemented in 2014-15. Why does this go through 15, the contract?
That's my question. I want to ask it a little different way.
Mr. Norton? Dr. Norton?
Hi, Scott Norton, Standards Assessments and Accountability. Good question. That is a backup plan, frankly. And, you know, assuming PARC came online, everything was in order, timely, everything was just as planned, we would be able to cut that contract off a year before the end date. And the state can do that. Just in case, you know, things get slowed down or whatever, then we've got a year of overlap that we can deal with.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Scott, $68.5 million, that's lots of money. And I'm of the impression that we are moving to simplify and to automate the testing. And that's kind of a follow-up to her question about, looks to me like we should not be contracting, well, to the year 2015 if we're likely to be making changes, hopefully changes that would economize some.
Yes, sir. Let me just say a word about the price. It's not real obvious from looking at this page, but that essentially takes the current pricing of iLeap and extends it out. It takes the iLeap program with all of its pieces and parts that it has. It has a number of enhancements and carries that through 14-15. Just to say again about 14-15, assuming PARC comes online as planned, everything goes well, we would be able to stop this a year before the end date, and you would not have that full amount expended.
But this amendment adds roughly $21 million to the current contract, and that extends the period of time?
Yes, sir. That's roughly, for iLeap, is about $5 million a year. So $5 million a year times 4 more years would be about $20 million, which is roughly what we've been paying for iLeap since 2006.
I would just like to see us be able to adjust and economize as the opportunity presents itself.
Yes, sir.
Without being locked into a contract.
Well,
Mr. Norton, are you saying that we're not necessarily locked into this price if we can economize in some aspects during the coming years?
Let me comment on those separately, Mr. Garvey, if I could. The first is the end date for a contract. Beth can explain it better than I can, but the state can end a contract for cause or convenience. Not a lawyer.
Convenience.
Sure. When the time comes, we can always get out of a contract early if we need to. So if it is not necessary to have that last year, we don't need to have it. It's just really a backup plan. Economizing is another story, and we try to do that as well. As you know, we had cuts over the last few years, so all of the contracts are at a somewhat reduced rate than they used to be. We've had to cut out some of the extras over the last few years. This holds the price about the same as it has been. Certainly, we'll always want to economize and continue to do that as we can.
So these contracts as written allow us to economize if we find ways to do that?
Through a negotiation, we have done that in the past, yes, sir.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes, sir. Mr. Gill.
How was this contract originally procured?
This was through an RFP process, a competitive bid, and
With pricing at the time?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do you have any other questions from the board?
I just want
Ms.
additional
Beebe.
clarification so that I understand. Mr. Norton, so you're saying that the contract is non-binding, that there's room for negotiation in the event that we don't have to adhere to, or we don't have a need for this expenditure?
Yes, ma'am, and Beth may want to help me a little bit. I'm actually saying two different things in the last few minutes. One is the state can end a contract, this one or any other, as I understand it, when it's time to end it. So if, the board decided we didn't need ILEAP after another year, you're not obligated to keep doing that, assuming that's what you want to do. Regarding negotiation, as we need to negotiate better prices, we have been able to do that in the past. And sometimes we've had to do that because of budget cuts. Sometimes we needed to add a program, so we had to economize on the ones that we have. That's done in many, many different ways, but we always have the right to do that.
So what I'm trying to understand, what is the purpose of entering into a contract? If,
That's the question.
to me, if you state that this is the contract, they're honoring their obligation to us, but I'm hearing you say that we don't have to honor our obligation to them as via the contract.
Ms. Beebe, I think what we are, and certainly the team can correct me if I'm not phrasing it correctly, but maybe the answer to all of this is that we are asking the board to authorize our ability to extend a contract. In other words, to authorize us to spend up to a certain amount. We are not committing to spending this amount. So if at any time we decide to cut off the contract because we no longer want to do something, if at any point we're able to say, actually, we don't need this much of it, we just need this much of it, we can reduce the amount of spending. We're just simply asking you to extend the ability that the maximum amount that we may spend on this item. Certainly no commitment to spending up to this amount.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do we have any further questions from the board? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item, please.
Your next item is item 5.1 on page 111, a consideration of fiscal dialogues as a result of the fiscal risk assessment process. The department recommendation is to receive.
Do we have a motion to receive?
I'll motion.
Ms. Bophy, do we have a second? Second. Ms. Bradford? Do we have any questions?
Well,
Ms. Beebe?
the two parishes identified on page 111, will we receive, Mr. White, additional information, a progress report, if you will, on the Department of Ed's efforts to assist?
We'd be happy to provide any information. Ms. I don't know what information specifically is planned, but to Ms. Beebe, to your question, of course, we'd be happy to provide any information as to what technical assistance we are providing. I will say this: we have over the Christmas holidays from Acting Superintendent Tyler, and will be in our administration communicating letters to St. Landry Parish indicating the urgency of the fiscal situation as we see it, offering our assistance, and perhaps offering some ways that the parish system may well reduce their cost, and are happy to furnish the board with that as well. But Ms. Ciano, if there are other pieces you think we could be sharing, then please do.
No, that's what we're going to do. East Louisiana has met the challenge, and we believe they will need no further actions from us. We'll just continue to be in contact with them. St. Landry will continue to work with and support as they meet their challenges.
Well, may I ask, to what extent is your role or the department's role in assisting St. Landry, since it has not yet been resolved? Or you, I guess my specific question, will you go in and meet with administration and offer some solutions, or are you allowing them to propose to you a remedy?
We have already met with them on a number of occasions with the superintendent and his staff, trying to offer them some advice. We've also put them in touch with other superintendents who have faced similar challenges, trying to utilize their knowledge as well from their experiences. So we have already provided some, and will continue to do that with regards to the situation in St. Landry.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Astor.
In the backup, Ms. Ciano, information says that the board met again on January 12th to adopt the new budget. Did they in fact adopt a new budget that resulted in cost-saving measures?
They adopted a partial recommendations from the superintendent with regards to some of their reductions that were necessary. They've not addressed them entirely. They do plan to meet again tomorrow to work on the rest of that. I think it's just some maybe tough choices, and they needed a little more time to work with the community and the individuals.
Well, I'd like to join Ms. Beebe and maybe being updated on the results of that meeting.
Be glad to.
Mr. Lee?
Ms. Ciano, I know there are at least one other school system that you've had discussions with that we've seen reports on that's not listed here. I can visit with you about it later. Don't want to name the school system, but you probably know what I'm talking about. I'm of the impression it's not getting any better, and I don't know where that stands.
Well, we can visit about it later, and I can give you a status report in person if you like.
Okay. Any further questions? Hearing none, are there any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item, please.
The next item is 6.1 on page 114, a consideration of RSD contracts and leases for action and special consideration. The department recommendation is to approve and to reword this agenda item as consideration of contracts and leases of $50,000 and over beginning in March of 2012.
Do we have a motion to that effect? Ms. Bradford, do we have a second? Ms. Dastu? Do we have any questions from the board? Ms. Beebe?
So what is the purpose of bringing this item before us? Was there a change in the dollar amount for this particular item, the contracts over and leases over $50,000?
We approved that.
Huh?
We approved that.
This is approval of contracts, and
$4 million.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got off track.
It's easy.
And Ms. Beebe and others, this is a fairly regular thing because the RSD's construction program in Orleans Parish is under the auspices of the state. These contracts are capital spend contracts coming out of the FEMA settlement to be spent on facilities in Orleans Parish. They come for your approval above $50,000.
I'm sorry, but I went back to the previous one.
Got it. No, but I think people should know that and wanted you to be aware.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, are there any objections to the motion?
Jim,
Hearing-
I'm going to abstain. I'm going to abstain from this one.
Okay. Please let the record note that Mr. Gio is abstaining. Do we have any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
The next item is 7.1 on page 158, a consideration of 8G program and budget revisions and/or progress reports on statewide or block grant programs for FY 2011-2012. The recommendation is to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Ms. Bradford. We have a second by Ms. Dastu.
Yes.
Do you have any questions from the board?
I'd just like some information on this
Ms.
one.
Bophy? Can we have someone from the department?
Kim Trippo, BESE staff. I'm going to ask that the program staff for the Louisiana Literacy Plan come down and give a little bit more information, please.
Put Carrie on the spot.
Carrie Laster, Office of Literacy.
Thank you. So I just want more information in general as to what we're looking at here.
Okay, basically what you're having is we removed a 5th grade ELA statewide project to focus more on the 3rd grade goal, which the 3rd grade goal that was adopted by the previous BESE board was it becomes due this year in 2013. 72% of our 3rd graders reading on grade level in 2013. I mean 2012. I'm sorry.
So we're gonna reshift the emphasis from 5th grade to 3rd grade.
Correct.
Okay.
We also are looking at the LA4 program. We asked to have, since the Louisiana Comprehensive Literacy Plan, which is a part of the 8G BESE grant, addresses birth to 4-year-olds. We made some changes so that we would have some funds moved to address birth to 4-year-olds.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any further questions? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
The next item is 7.2 on page 201. It is a consideration of the 8G Master Calendar of Activities. The recommendation is to approve and reword the item as a consideration of 8G funding cycle activities starting in March of 2012.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. Moved by Ms. Dastu. Do
Mr.
we have
Chair.
any questions from the board? Do we have comments from staff?
Yes, I'd just like to make just a little interjection. The descriptions that you see before you, they are for 5 of the 8G statewide programs, and they're being presented for approval. It's necessary for us to continue working with the department for the remaining 4. And so the staff is going to request that the board delegate authority to the 8G study group or work group so that they will be able to approve those remaining statewide program descriptions.
Mr. Garvey, I will move that the board delegate the authority to the 8G work group to approve the remaining statewide program descriptions for F.
Okay, is that a substitute motion, or are you amending the original motion to include that? The second
I
motion.
think it would have to be proceeded as a second motion. Am I right?
We're just going to add it.
Oh, we can do amended. Yeah. Amend it.
You'd like to amend the motion to include that item, that issue?
It's my motion, so I did.
Okay.
Could you please restate the motion for clarity?
Or the amendment, could you restate the amendment?
That the board delegate the authority to the 8G work group to approve the remaining statewide program descriptions for the year 13.
Can you
I'll
na-
second it, and I'd like to speak to it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Lee?
Can you name, you said it's 4 other areas?
Yes.
Can you name those for us?
We're still working on the exact names for those.
Originally in the, originally in the proposal, there were 4 programs listed, but it will ultimately, we have not confirmed that yet. The state superintendent has not confirmed that in terms of determining statewide programs. So we have 4 now that could ultimately change, and more could come before the 8G work group.
And we're, as the work group is a set of members, of board members, I'd like us to be able to meet with the HE working group, Mr. Lee, to ultimately approve the titles of those and approve the spending plan within those new categories.
Can you give us an idea of approximately how much money we're talking about?
I believe it's about $7 million.
7 million. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dastu?
Just like to share a little bit about the AG work group. Currently, the membership is John Bennett, Walter Lee, was myself, and Ms. Johnson. I think there might have been was there a fifth member of the work group? But there's clearly at least one opening on the AG work group. They generally come from finance and then other members who express an interest and work in this area. If you have an interest in participating in the AG work group, please let Catherine or myself know.
When is, if I may?
Mr. Romer?
Remind me again, I know
He
it's
just
part of the issue. Remind me again of the timeline for the finalization of that.
Of the descriptions?
Yeah, the descriptions, and then if and when does it come back to this board for final concurrence, or what you're asking for is us to delegate that authority? Remind me again.
I think we're asking for you to delegate the authority to the work group. We will bring it back before. We just need to get it over to the legislature, so we're trying to get it done in a timely
It is in some respects a transition issue, Mr. Romer, in that there were several items and carried over from last year. In looking at it, I think it makes sense to go a little bit deeper with the work group to assess whether or not the plan categories really align with strategy going forward. Unfortunately, that also coincides with a timeline to get it to the legislature. It strikes me that the most expedient way, while at the same time being able to have an earnest discussion, is to go through the work group.
I agree. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
The next item is 10.1 on page 243, a consideration of revisions to the Louisiana Administrative Code, Title 28, Part 1, Section 1107D, Minimum Foundation Program, regarding the MFP student membership definition, MFP add-on student units. The department recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
We have a motion to approve.
A motion.
Ms. Boping, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Dastu, do we have any questions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Beebe.
As it relates to the virtual learning, virtual school, is this specific? I know that we have a virtual school, but with those school districts having virtual learning programs, is this inclusive?
Do we have staff that can address that, please? Ms. Keno?
This applies to the membership in the newest virtual charter schools, whereby there is no participation in the food and school lunch program. So they have this definition actually allows them to use the qualifying for that program as the indicator for at-risk.
In other words,
It's just a
because
technical.
they're not in the school building, they don't receive free or reduced lunch. Instead, we are proposing that to be counted for at risk, we say they qualify for free and reduced lunch just because they don't actually ever receive a lunch.
Okay, but I recognize that fact. But once again, with those school systems having a virtual learning program, for example, St. Martin Parish will engage in a virtual learning program. The same could be said for the at-risk, to identify the at-risk population.
Oh, yes.
Or
And
is it just
going forward,
excluded?
yes.
Going forward, that is how it would be, yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Any further questions? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
The next item is 10.2 on page 245, a consideration of revisions to the Louisiana Administrative Code, Title 28, Part 1, Section 501, committees regarding committee restructuring. We have a change on the agenda, and the BESE recommendation is to delete this item from the agenda.
Move to delete.
Ms. Dastu, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Bradford? Do we have any questions on this item? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
That concludes your agenda.
Board members, I think we just broke a record.
You did good. You did good, John.
You're welcome.
You're getting better in your old age. Jim? Well done.